Hello and welcome to quite an unusual one today. We're going to look at an asteroid called Melusine. But before we do that, and I think it's related, I wanted to share some really amazing stuff about this eruption in Hawaii of a volcano that's going off right now. So I'll just share a picture of the volcano. And there's some really amazing astrology going on with this because, let me open that more fully, because Haumea is a trans-Neptunian object, and she is a Hawaiian fertility goddess, and she's been sitting in Gene Key 50 for a number of years. And when the Venus star point happened a couple of months back, it was exactly conjunct Haumea, and she's all about new earth codes, new ways of thinking about and being with earth coming online. So what was amazing is that Pele, who is her daughter in mythology and the goddess of volcanoes, was conjunct her at this place where the Venus star point was a couple of months ago in Gene Key 50. So I thought that was absolutely amazing. So along with Medusa is conjunct Pluto at the moment in the 60, which is all about truth and the cracking open of the vessel. So there's a lot of energy right now of the truth coming out. And that can be quite like repressed traumatic truths in families. But it also feels like the earth is processing something really big. This is the biggest volcano in the world, so it's quite something to see it erupting. So what's going on with Venus today is also interesting. So there's a part of the zodiac around 27 degrees Sagittarius, which is called the galactic center, and all life radiates out of the center. If you imagine all the molecules that make up life have emerged from this black hole, this galactic center. So Venus is in Gene Key 11 line 2, so approaching the galactic center. Will cross over in the next week or so. And Mercury is actually bang on the galactic center, Gene Key 11 line 6. So that's very powerful, and they're actually with Gaia. So Gaia is 11 line 2. So Gaia is exactly conjunct Venus as well. So this is another indication, like something amazing is happening with Gaia. With Venus is goddess of fertility and plants. Haumea is a goddess of fertility and rebirth as well. So lots of really positive energy. The other thing that's going on that's interesting is that Mars is at the moment, and is in the 45th gene key. So this is one we've been doing in the mudra practice on Soul Tribe. So the 45, it's in the I Ching, it's the gathering in of the harvest. So it's linked to food and resources. In the gene keys, it's about domination, moving to synergy, and then communion is the highest. So this is the mudra of the 45. So this new moon, sorry, the full moon that's just about to happen on the 8th of December, that is going to be exactly conjunct Mars in this 45. So that's going to be another shift, maybe not for everyone, but you know, how do we manage resources? How do we get to a place where we feel we could share resources. Yeah, my friend is in New Zealand, and apparently there's quite a big backlash against kind of political correctness around the Maori, and I think that kind of probably, you know, comes from this fear that there's not enough to go around. It's a huge kind of conditioned fear that all of us are going to hold to some degree. And I know for myself, I'm constantly working on that kind of fear, and letting it go and expanding into generosity and flow. So this full moon should really help us, and Mars being in the 45, going retrograde, is kind of uncovering, it's always digging deeper when something's going retrograde. And yeah, the final thing I'm just going to mention here is that Jupiter is in that 25th gene key on that cusp between Aries and Pisces. So this is the end and the beginning. And Jupiter's been going back and forward there all year long. And that's about universal love. So it kind of really fits into this whole big theme that we're at an ending and there's a big beginning happening. And this volcano feels so important because also, you know, Venus has been in the underworld and now she's rising. So as the sun leaves Scorpio into Sag, that's like the end of the sun being in the underworld. And it really feels like this volcano is Venus. It's her resurrection, basically, like writ large, and up she's coming, and she'll be visible again on the 22nd of December as evening star. Okay, so I just wanted to say all that because it feels like mega important, and it feels like Melusine. No one's ever heard of Melusine. She kind of bounced into my life. I hadn't heard of her until about 3 weeks ago. And she's a mermaid. And these mermaids, though, they really call me this kind of oceanic consciousness. And the way I think of it is we have like Lemurian, Atlantean consciousness and DNA within our bodies. And as we clear all this fog and ancestral karma, this DNA it kind of gains more clarity. You know, we start to be able to really perceive things differently. So it's interesting, Melusine's arrived right now because Neptune has just come out of retrograde. So Neptune, in Pisces especially, its ruling sign, is all about like imagination and otherworldliness, the oceanic consciousness. And it feels like this is part of this DNA story, like we're remembering who we are. You know, maybe in 5 years' time, it'll be sort of completely normal to talk about our fairy DNA and our mermaid DNA and our serpentine DNA. You know, that'll just be like a normal conversation among people. It won't seem completely crazy that we have all these kind of layers of aeons and aeons within us, that like DNA is living and vibrant, and it's still got all these things in it. Okay, so who is Melusine? I've done a little thing here that's quite visual so we can look at her. So she's mainly associated with France, but her father was a Scottish king. And I love this myth. It's got so, like many myths, it's got so many layers that you could understand this at. Melusine's mother is a fairy woman called Procene, and she meets this king from Scotland, and he falls madly in love with her. His first wife has just died, and Melusine hears the story, and she thinks, oh yeah, he was pretty nice to his first wife, so yeah, I'll give this guy a go. But she says to him, but you must never come into my birthing chamber. That's the only condition, that you must never do that. And then later on, she gives birth to triplets, one of which is Melusine. There's 3 girls. And the father, in his joy, forgets about his promise, and he rushes into the birthing room. And I think this is connected. And I read something like an analysis of the story about birthing fluids and the sort of female fluids of the being a kind of taboo. But it all kind of gets really tragic then, because she takes her daughters in a huff off to Avalon, and then, like, they grow up, and when they're about 15, she tells them the story, but the mother's still like completely heartbroken, and the Scottish king is. So it feels like a bit kind of tragic that it all ended over his joy of, you know, her having these babies. Anyway, it did. And the mother now tells Melusine and her sisters what happened. And Melusine gets really angry with her father, and with her sisters conspires to trap their father in a mountain. And they come back to mom thinking that mom's going to be really happy that they've done this. And mom is like completely heartbroken. She's like, I can't believe you've done that. And she curses Melusine. And the curse is that she's going to become like this mermaid serpent, like we see in this picture here. But, I'm just going to try going to the slideshow. Here we go. Yay. Look at that. I've done that without being able to do anything else. I don't know. Okay, so I've got rid of the sidebar anyway. So she's cursed to become this mermaid on Saturdays. And so it's a similar kind of story, that she's allowed to marry, but her husband can never see her on Saturdays. And if he does, then this whole thing's going to end very badly. So she does meet this guy in the forest, and she's bathing in a spring, which is always a sign of like this otherworldly quality. And along comes this noble man, but he's very poor, called Raymond, and he falls madly in love with her. And she says, okay, I'll marry you, but you can never see me on a Saturday. But of course, he gets curious. What is she doing on a Saturday? And he gets jealous as well, thinking maybe she's having an affair. And a relative, a male relative, is like, you shouldn't be letting your wife do this. You know, you should know what she's up to on Saturdays. So he spies on her, and he sees her in this form. And then he blurts it out in the court. So she has to basically go, and she's heard sort of mourning in the wind. But another interesting thing with Melusine is she was connected with wealth. So although she was cursed with being the serpentine being, and I feel this connects to Pluto actually last week, because Pluto is wealth bringer. Melusine was, so she had this curse, but her mother said, Bart, wherever you are, you will create wealth. And she did. So in this part of France where she's well known, you know, she created cities and agriculture and all kinds of things. And when we look at mermaid stories from around the world, they're often said to have gifted humanity with like writing, civilization, agriculture, you know, all these things that built our world. You know, the archaeological records have this amazing thing that mermaid people or more mermen sometimes gave us this knowledge. Let's just go through this a bit. So Melusine as an asteroid was discovered in France by the same guy who discovered Mary Magdalene. And he was quite prolific, this astronomer. He discovered like 99 asteroids. He must have had his eye on the heavens every single night. And he named them all after women or priestess archetypes. So there's like Pythia and Dodona. These are all ones he discovered. So he was obviously like quite interested, well, very interested in that archetype. And she's in the main asteroid belt there. Am I going to be able to? Now I can't move the thing. Oh, hang on. Okay. So psychological complexes. So these are quite interesting, and these are just how it's kind of come to me. And I'm really interested to see, and I think you're going to connect maybe with why she's kind of come in for us right now. So there's this theme of being an otherworldly child in your family or in your culture. You know, being kind of a magical child maybe is another word for it. And then especially in the interaction with the male, traditionally, it's like the intellect of the male or the intellect generally dismisses this otherworldly magical being as being kind of irrelevant or even stupid. You know, it's kind of like, well, why would you even spend any time on that? So the archetype is kind of completely dismissed at an intellectual level, which essentially means if you are this type of person, and I've experienced this in most of my relationships with men up until this one, that I couldn't express this otherworldly or magical side of myself or esoteric side. It's like that had to be almost like separate from the relationship. And then there's another aspect, which is religious, because like my parents were very religious, and so I wasn't allowed to talk about unicorns, or, you know, if Harry Potter was around when I was a child, I wouldn't have been allowed to read that. So there's also like a religious way in which these archetypes could become really repressed in ourselves. And I know it's taken like most of my life to go, yes, I am this really strange person, you know, who feels like a mermaid in a human body and stuff like that. But I now know loads of other women who feel like that too. So it's, you know, it's like I'm obviously not the only one. So I wonder if you have that in your family, and how you kind of, the fact you're here means you have like leanings towards the esoteric and the magical, you know. So how is that manifested in your relationship? Are you able to share that kind of part of yourself? So then another thing that Melusine, this is in the story of her mother, really, is about shame about childbirth, body fluids, menstrual blood. You know, how do we feel about these part, like very natural parts of us. But again, I know in my upbringing, you know, you couldn't talk about menstrual blood or something. It's like the worst thing you could possibly talk about. So that's another like really like heavy level of conditioning around women. Anger towards the father, being cursed by the mother and having a lifelong affliction through the mother's anger. So it feels like the mother's anger like shapes your life in a way, maybe because of something you did that you thought she might like even, and then turns out she didn't. And the creation of wealth and fertility for the people. So I'm really feeling this through the 45th gene key at the moment. And some of you came on a bit later, and I was saying the full moon is conjunct Mars in the 45th gene key later on in the week. So this whole thing about the sharing of the harvest, you know, wealth flowing out into the world as love, as money, as resources. It feels like we're on the cusp of a change. And I sort of say that a bit with trepidation, because I know how much of a backlash there is in the world and how much fear there is about lack at the same time as kind of saying that. Another issue is respect for the privacy of your partner. You know, that essentially what goes wrong with Melusine and Raymond is he doesn't have respect for her privacy. And so that can be an archetypal issue. You know, would you break into your partner's phone or wouldn't you? That's the question. And having a deep and shameful secret to hide, especially from a male partner or husband. So Melusine had to hide her true nature from her husband. And so archetypally, we might have something like that. And self-banishment. So at the end of this myth, Melusine turns into a dragon and flies off. So she kind of banishes herself effectively. And she has extraordinary powers to recreate herself through the aeons, because she's actually the Starbucks mermaid on their logo. That's Melusine, basically. So actually, of all the archetypes in the world, and we've probably never heard of her, but there she is. She's like writ large, like globally. So I think that's really funny that she's kind of found this way to be so visible. So looking up Melusine is a bit tricky. You have to do it on, well, I've done it on a site called astro.com. So I suggest have a look at whether you can do that. And what you have to do is choose the, there's an extended chart section, and you have to put her number in, which is, had it before. Let me go back to the thing. So this is her number 373. So in the extended chart, you have to put 373. If you have trouble doing it and you want to know where she is, let me know and I will help you. So, but give it a go first. It can be a little bit tricky. Okay, so I wanted to invite any response to that, you know, any of the themes that were raised there resonate with you. So I'm going to mute now and see what everyone else has to say.
Could you stop recording?